of the Board of Education, and it's only designated as special tonight because we had to change the date because it was supposed to be tomorrow, and tomorrow's graduation, and it didn't seem like a good time to have them back to back. So if we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to start by reading our mission statement to remind us of why we're all here. Our mission is to inspire in each student a joy and passion for learning and a commitment to excellence, personal integrity, and social responsibility. That always seems to be a good segue for our Avon Achievers. So I'd like to call up David Pelling, if you'd like to come forward, and Houston Putnam Lowry will assist you, as well as JC Back.
Thank you. So I know this is a little bit breaking in tradition, but I'd actually like to ask Mr. Abrams to join me up here. Our first Avon Achievers Award tonight are going to 3 young ladies who have really made a significant difference. But to introduce them and to explain their contribution, I would like to invite our faculty member, Stuart Abrams, from the Social Studies Department, to make the presentations. Mr. Abrams.
Thanks. So I'd like to thank Dr. Carnamola, the Board of Ed, and especially Mr. Pelling for giving me the opportunity to introduce these extraordinary students, Zoe Quinones, Julia Schufro, and Anna Zakiris, as they are deservedly recognized by you as Avon Achievers. I was asked by an organization called Voices of Hope, made up of second and third generation Holocaust survivors, if I could bring some of our students to the Capitol to testify before the State Education Committee and give testimony as to the importance of Holocaust and genocide education and its relevance to current events. The scene we walked into was, to say the least, wild and chaotic. The room was filled with people, wall-to-wall people. And yet our students were still able to calmly offer testimony that was articulate, insightful, scholarly, and passionate. In a unanimous vote of the legislature and ultimately signed by the governor, Holocaust and genocide awareness is now a required course of study for all Connecticut public schools. I can't tell you how many people contacted me to tell me that it was our students that were the difference that made the difference in this vote. The topic is so important for all current and future students in our country that the U.S. Congress is considering passing a bipartisan bill with very similar legislation to Connecticut's called the Never Again Education Act. We at Avon High School have been ahead of the curve in this area of study for more than 15 years now, as we have had a genocide and human behavior class in our curriculum for at least that long. Actually, watching our students, what I was reminded of was the students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida. People were so impressed, and deservedly so, with those students when they spoke out so beautifully about the unbearable tragedy at their high school. And yet this should come as no surprise to any of us. We all get to be with and work with articulate and passionate students just like those from Parkland every day of our school year. What Zoe, Julia, and Anna know and why this legislation was so important is that the study of the Shoah and genocide both disgusts and inspires us. That empathy must and can be learned, that no one is immune to hate crimes and intolerance, that hate gives victory to those that give us pain, that to forget the victims is to kill them again, and finally, that the opposite of love is not hate, but indifference. Perhaps most importantly, these beautiful young adults have come to accept and appreciate their heroic imagination. They're no longer heroes in waiting. No, they've become warriors on the front lines, battling for human rights and social justice. Lastly, we have lots of evidence, information, and research about the victims of, perpetrators of, and bystanders to the crime of genocide. The group that we know the least about, and I think is the most important, is the rescuers. Our students have become 21st century exemplars of those heroic rescuers of the past. With the lack of empathy and rapport that we're witnessing today in Washington from our own leaders, which seems to be eroding and tearing away at the fabric of our great nation, it gives me, and it should give you as well, tremendous hope for future generations, knowing that young women like Zoe, Julia, and Anna understand that once human beings have the desire to humiliate another, there is simply no way back. Thank you.
like to acknowledge the extraordinary role that Mr. Abrams played in helping our young people to make this difference. Thank you, Mr. Abrams, for being the heart and conscience of Avon. Our second awards tonight are going to two faculty members who went above and beyond. So if we could have Elizabeth Sanborn and Jenna Aylesworth, please join me. These two faculty members coordinated our capstone project this year for 285 seniors. As you know, this year the capstone replaced our senior mastery project. This was more than a year of planning, followed by individual meetings with each senior to review their proposals, assign mentors, review deadlines, coordinate presentations, grading of presentations, and then mentoring those that needed additional opportunities to complete this assignment. They each individually spent many hours during their prep periods doing this work. They are both outstanding educators, and we are grateful for all their efforts. Thank you both for doing all that you do for the students at Avon High School.
Thank you, David. So I just want to personally congratulate Anna, Julia, and Zoe. I'm very proud of you, and I know all of us are. You did a lot of great work, and I'm not surprised that you were the tipping point that changed people's minds. Thank you for taking time to go there and be vocal. You're just starting out, so keep doing it. I also want to thank Jenna and Betsy. I know it says Elizabeth, but I'm used to that. But thank you for all the hard work that you put into this project, and moving forward, it's just going to get better. So I realize that most of you here have come for this purpose. If you'd like to be dismissed for the rest of your evening, you are welcome to step out, and no one will judge. All right, moving along. Can I have a motion to approve the Board of Education minutes from the May 15th, 2018 meeting?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Houston. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Laura. Now is our communication from the public portion. So is there anyone
Point of order, shouldn't we vote?
Oh, I apologize. Okay. All in favor of passing the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. That was a close one, Houston. Okay. Communication from the public. And do I have anyone that would like to come forward? Sean, come on up. State your name for the record, please.
Is it okay to stand here?
Yes, the mic isn't working, so if you want to project, that would be helpful.
I was a PE teacher. Does this?
Okay.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sean George, and I actually grew up in Avon, and I am now raising my 3 kids in town. I have Kate, who is 12, who's entering Avon Middle School next year, Gavin, who is 11, who is going to be a 6th grader at Thompson Brook, and Maddie, who is 5, and he will be a 1st grader at Pine Grove. And I'm here because as a parent and as a community member, about a month ago, it was brought to my attention 211 Counts. And 211counts.org is actually a website you can go to learn about the 211 calls in your community. When I looked this up back in early May, what I found was our top need in Avon for our 211 calls were mental health calls, and that was 36% out of the 100% of phone calls for our town. When you look at that 36% of the phone calls to 211 in Avon, 80% of those were for suicide or crisis intervention phone calls. That meant 157 phone calls at that point in time in the calendar year were for suicide or crisis intervention in our town. Now, out of those 157 phone calls, 127 of those phone calls were for ages 18 and under. So this really alarmed me, and what I did is I kind of just put it out there via social media saying, I'm not sure if there's already a conversation being started in our community about this, but that number was very concerning to me as just an individual, also as a parent, and as someone who just really loves to love people, and it hurts me to see any child or family going through this struggle in our community. So I put it out there via social media, called the library to set up a meeting last week, and it was amazing. We had about 12 people show up for this meeting, and what I said is we're just starting a conversation about mental health in Avon, and what it is we're looking to target individuals. And when I say this, it's just individuals need to be supported in our communities. Kids need to find support. The circle around them is family, and families want to support their children. But the next circle around the families is our schools, because majority of the time our kids are spending in school. So I am here tonight to raise awareness about this number in our community because I think it is very significant. And I know that we're here because we believe in educating the whole child. And I want to offer to start bridging with you here as a community member and as we start this dialogue within our community of how specifically here, as schools, we can be implementing programs. There are programs currently going on. There are new ones. I spoke with Dave Kimball over at the middle school. I know they're starting the Love Does program. But just starting this dialogue so we can know what's happening in the schools, you can know what we're doing, but we could do things separately or we could do it together. And it's the best interest of the child that we come together and do this and start this dialogue and continue the dialogue and support one another so that we're supporting the children. So when they come to the table, when they come to the school, that we're doing our best to support them and their whole being. And also for the families, in the conversation, there was a couple family members brought up that there might be a disconnect, some gaps happening. We know everyone's doing their best, but if we can recognize those gaps and start closing those gaps, best to support the child, I think it's necessary we have this conversation. So I thank you for having me come tonight and hearing this statistic and working together and genuinely in the best interest of the child, best interest of our families in the community and the community as a whole, that the kids are leaving here to become thriving future leaders and people. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to come forward? Please come up, and if you could again say your name for the record and project because the mic's not working.
Sure. My name's Kathy Marzano. I lived in Avon 35 years. I'm Sean's mom, and I worked in the schools for 29 of those years and ended my tenure in school as a guidance counselor at Avon Middle School. I went to the meeting that Sean held last week, and I was concerned that some of the same things that were going on when I was there are still going on. I love the fact that there are things going on that are working towards changes. I love the fact that social workers, and some of you will remember I've spoken before about this, are coming back into our schools. That's awesome. There's one for the high school, one for AMS and TBS, and one for PGS in the fall and RBS. That's terrific. I'm glad advisory is going back into the middle school. I'm glad Dave is starting the program that he's starting. I know that there are school climate committees. Jackie's been on one for a while. I was on it when I was in the school. The one thing I would ask is as these conversations go on, that we think of how we can support the child, the family, and the staff in the schools as well. How we can make each of those three feel safe when something's happening, that that these climate committees and these different initiatives report back to the community and let them know what's available to all of those three so that things don't happen that do happen. Attendance clerks are vital. Teachers may miss the fact that kids have missed school 4 days in a row, and if there's nobody making people aware of that or letting people in the school know that they should call home and find out what's happening and what's the next step that they do. I just think that there are some great things happening and they need to continue, but they need to come out with specific things that can help the staff, the students, the parent, the family, and the staff so we can all meet the needs. You have amazing staff here. I love so many of the people that work in the school system. But there are holes, and as Sean said, we need to fill them, and the one way is communicating. So I thank you for what you're doing, and I encourage you to continue. I've got grandkids in the system now, okay, guys? Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Would anyone else like to speak? Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. It is crucial work, and moving forward, we'll definitely have that in our thoughts. So I appreciate that. So now we'll move on to items of information and proposals. Our first one is the primary instructional materials for review. Donna, did you want to speak to that?
Actually, it's just a memo asking the board to please launch the 30-day review under the board policy 6161. The Curriculum Professional Council met the 2/3 vote for those to go through, and all of the supporting documentation is underneath of the books, the votes, and then a detail of the books that are being proposed. Normally, these would go through the Curriculum Professional Practices Committee first and then move up to the board. But the meeting shifted prior to the CPTC meetings. We're a little off track, and some of these books are for the fall, so we'd like to get them out for that public review and not wait until the fall to launch that.
Do any board members have any questions or comments? Okay, so since time is of the essence, could I have a motion to commence the 30-day inspection period for the new primary instructional materials?
So moved. Second.
Okay, so Jason moves and Houston seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously.
Thank you, and these are all on review down at the central office in the registrar's area. Okay.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, next we had our student representative report. I'm thinking because tomorrow is the last day of school, perhaps they're studying for their finals, and we missed them tonight, but certainly I think it's important to acknowledge the work that they have done with us. I'm always grateful to have their voices at the table, and they are so willing to share their perspective. So just have it on record that we do appreciate the time and the effort that they have to give for this, and that they participate wholeheartedly. That's important. Okay, so now the financial report. Heather, would you like to speak to that, please?
Yes, as I shared at the Finance Subcommittee meeting, you'll see a pretty drastic adjustment to unencumbered balance. What I did this year for the first time was I made two journal entries, one for the employer health insurance contribution between 12/21 and 5/31, and the other for the administration and stop loss fees between the same time periods. Those two journal entries resulted in an expenditure essentially of just over $3.2 million. I could break down the numbers for you, but why bother? So anyway, it's a drastic change from the month prior. I also wanted to mention additionally all the year-end encumbrances that the board had approved in May. Those have been entered in the respective line items. And as of today, we have 423 open purchase orders, which is down from the Finance Subcommittee of 447.
Thank you, Heather. Any comments or questions from the board?
A couple of questions. How many purchase orders do we have open at close of year end?
Close of year end or close of period 13?
Close of our fiscal year.
Close of period 13, we should have anywhere between 125 and 150 open purchase orders.
Okay. Why so many open? Because we only have, 12 more days?
Technically, when we run period 13, we actually have a month and a half.
Okay.
Houston, you all set?
I'm all set.
Okay, anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Heather. And now we'll move on to our committees and liaison reports. So for curriculum and professional practices, Jackie, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. Hold on. We met and we discussed the world language curriculum. We talked about the new benchmarks and course standards that were going to be put forward. We also discussed interventions, the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 interventions. We discussed the strengths and weaknesses throughout the district, as well as the roles of the new social workers and kind of where they would be placed and how they were going to function. So it was a very detailed meeting, and I think we all agreed to move the world language curriculum forward to the larger board.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for Jackie?
I think Bridget and I, we're still trying to figure out if we should meet at all over the summer, if you need us for anything or not.
Thank you. Finance, Jay?
So I don't have anything additional to report except what we're going to accomplish later in the agenda. And it's under new business, the year-end encumbrances, and most of what we talked about.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Jay? Okay. Moving on to negotiations, Jason?
Yeah, thanks, Deb. A couple of things to report. We have a proposed collective bargaining agreement with the safety and security specialists. We'll discuss in executive session, hopefully vote on afterwards. We had our first meeting with the custodians and maintainers 3-4 weeks ago, and we're scheduled to meet with them again in July. And we're getting ready to start our negotiations with the teachers. Again, I believe our first meeting with them is in July. So that's the report.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions or negotiations? Okay, thank you. Policy, Laura?
So as you will see in your packet, we did go over quite a few policies during our subcommittee meeting, including business, non-instruction operations, purchasing, retention, and we had intended to put up not only those for a first read, but the policy that we discussed pertaining to attendance as presented tonight, with the thought that we wanted to get it in for any publication of handbooks. However, the policy, as it turns out, requires some more review of the regulations. So while I was concerned that it might have been left off inadvertently, it's actually something that we need to look at more in depth, potentially over a special meeting that might take place over the summer. So the committee will be looking towards the superintendent for her recommendation as to how we should proceed.
Any questions for Laura? Okay.
Wait till
Yep.
get to the next one. Yep.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, liaison report. So the board rep to Curriculum Professional Development Council, Ogden, since it was your first meeting, I was wondering if you wanted to share your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll start, and then you can use that because you also joined as well. So like Deb said, this is my first meeting, and I was very impressed by the collaboration. I really thought it was valuable to have representatives from different schools, different grades, different disciplines, all in one room discussing all the different topics that came up, including some of what Dr. Nessa mentioned about the books that we're going to be to public review. So, yeah, it was very impressive. The collaboration was tremendous. I think it's only done a handful of times a year, maybe a couple of times a year, and maybe an opportunity to do more. I think some of the teachers' comments during breaks and stuff, so they were very appreciative of it as well. So it's a great opportunity and great forum to bring forth ideas.
Thank you. Lana, did you want to add anything to this conversation about what was covered that day, or?
We, as Bogdan mentioned, we covered new proposals for textbooks, new proposals for courses that will run in the 1920 year. We do them in the spring to have them lined up for budget purposes. We looked at some new software for the district for our students to support some of the learning. We did our annual review of the evaluation program, which you'll see later on here. That will take a vote of yours on the consent calendar, but there were no changes to it. I'll kind of forecast as we move forward. We also spent some time looking at what has happened since we did our mathematics full review and what work has been done over the course of this year based on those recommendations. So that was an update. We had the review of the English language arts curriculum. So there was a presentation, then each group did some discussions, gave feedback. So that feedback now will go back to the teachers as they set their long and short-term goals of the work we'll do on that curriculum. So those are a handful of the pieces that we worked on that day.
Excellent, thank you.
We had a full agenda.
We did. We got a lot done, and it's always nice to be a part of that. So I'm glad it's such a welcoming environment of the board members that attend as well. So thank you for all the work. Any questions? Okay. Board representative to the Board of Finance, David.
There hasn't been any activity of the Board of Finance because they had a number of dates on their calendar that were open for the contingency if the budget failed and if they had to go back for a second or a third referendum. Fortunately, those things never happened, so those meetings didn't happen either. Their next meeting is a week from today, and I anticipate the only matter of any real interest to us in that meeting will be if any further progress is made on the turf field. And that will almost certainly be on their agenda in one form or another. And so I'll be there to take note of that issue if it arises.
Thank you. Any questions for David? Kind of hard without any meetings taking place, but
Can I ask the chair? I believe maybe
There's also the possibility that the final appropriations for the district will be discussed at that next Board of Finance meeting, am I correct?
Yes.
From the open choice program,
Yes.
correct?
So we still have that motion in front of them, yes?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, Avon Town Council, Jason.
What an excellent segue. I was present at the meeting on June 7th. As usual, the turf field project came up. It was mostly just kind of a quick recap of our joint meeting. Some of the highlights that came up at the town council meeting were concerns that had been brought up at our joint meeting about the potential heat on the field on very hot days. A little more discussion on the fill that will ultimately be used. And then just a little discussion on the fact that I think some of us learned for the first time maybe that once the turf field goes in, if it goes in, graduation would have to be moved because you can't set up graduation on the turf field. So those items were discussed at the town council meeting in terms of the turf. The supplemental appropriation for open choice was brought up. Heather was there to give a little background information. The council voted and approved that, and actually thanks was conveyed to the Board of Ed for continuing to take advantage of that program. So that was a nice compliment from the town council. And towards the end of the meeting, an issue came up about the high school fire alarm system that is scheduled to be updated here. And there was some discussion about the fact that the project had to be delayed somewhat because of an unanticipated cost increase. So Heather actually was still present at the meeting, was able to give some additional information about that. And the fact that the alarm system essentially needs to be replaced because it's obsolete and can't be fixed anymore. There were some concerns about why a fire alarm was being upgraded if it was still good enough to last another year. But I think Heather was helpful in kind of putting those concerns to rest. So that was essentially all of our issues that came up at the town council meeting. The one thing I wanted to bring up, just briefly, was the role of us as liaisons, whether it be at the town council meeting or the Board of Finance meeting. I've heard some discussions that our past history or tradition has been to sometimes go to these meetings and give somewhat of a report to the town council or the Board of Finance. I will tell you, I have not been doing that since I've been the liaison. My personal opinion is that my role there as a liaison to the town council is to essentially go and monitor the town council meeting, take the pulse of what's going on in the town council, report back to us so we know what's going on in terms of, what's going on with the different boards. I don't have any problem with the idea of giving a report, but my personal feeling is that it's not necessarily good practice for one board member to show up at a town council meeting and just provide information to the town council. It's kind of like the old telephone game. It doesn't necessarily always go right. So my opinion would be if issues come up, whether it's the town council or the Board of Finance meeting, the right way for the two boards or the organizations to convey information would be through the superintendent and through the town manager. That's my personal opinion. If there's differing opinions about the role of the liaison, I'd be glad to listen to them, but that's how I've been handling it, and that's how I view it.
I think it changes from one issue to the next in that based on the way the calendars work and meetings and the agendas, there are times when you walk in as the board liaison and you know you're going to get questioned about something that has come up or was decided at the recent board meeting, things like the turf field and certain other matters. Whereas these boards tend to feel entitled to ask questions of the liaison, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the entire board. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board chair, but if they have questions that can be answered based on the facts that are published in meeting minutes and publicly available information, I don't think it's a real crime to take a swipe at answering those questions. If they get out of hand, if the questions continue to steamroll as they did with the security upgrades and so on, then that became the subject of another meeting later on. But there are times when they ask about simple matters for which we have simple solutions. We either have a motion that was approved or we don't. There are times when you can take care of those things. So I wouldn't have a hard and fast policy to say that we don't supply any kind of status update to those boards, but that we have some latitude based on the subject matter at hand for that particular meeting and that board's interest at that time.
Yeah, my point was I think you opened yourself up to a slippery slope. You know, if it's a simple run-of-the-mill question like, what color was the carpet in your room? Sure. Oh, sorry. And again, it was just to bring up the topic for conversation, but my personal, again, preference is that, you know, information about board business and town council business be conveyed through the professionals, is my personal opinion. I think the Board of Finance or the town council, if they would like to know what's going on at our Board of Ed meetings, could send their own liaisons. So that's just my personal opinion.
Thank you, Jason. I think, we've discussed this before too. If we were an agenda item, that would be helpful for us to prepare something to bring as well, because then we would know perhaps the kinds of questions that would be asked, and that would only be fair to the two of you, if you're still representing, to give you some talking points if that's needed. But I do tend to agree that it's a gathering to bring back here, and we certainly welcome anyone from the Board of Finance or Town Council to come and witness our meeting as well and bring it back to theirs. Does anyone else have questions or comments?
I just want to chime in. My opinion, I kind of share both of your thoughts. I agree with you, David. It's something kind of cut and dry, no problem, right?
Right.
But I do think that, and I think we've actually had this happen before. All of us can have such kind of different shades on a certain topic, right? And we think, I can leave here thinking that Laura and I really agree on X, and then I'll say, wasn't X great? And she'll say, no, it was awful, or whatever. So I think we have to kind of keep that in mind when we are really in that capacity. You are speaking for the whole board, right? It's kind of one of those weird situations where you are representing all 9 of us. So I guess I would land somewhere in the middle. I think you're right. We don't want to make, unless the person was agreeing with everything that I really, really advocated for. But really, it's probably most fair to all of us to have kind of a more neutral stance in those meetings, I would think.
Thank you. Bogdan?
I mean, I would just add to Jason's point, anything beyond a reading of the minutes for that specific topic can be a cause for interpretation, right? And in that case, you get in the situation Jason explains that. And they have access to the minutes, so we can maybe remind them what those are. But again, going beyond that, I think you cross the threshold.
Sometimes, based on the way the calendars work, they just want to know if they're asking about a matter, it might be something that's coming up on an upcoming agenda, and it might be they just want to know that it's being addressed. And it may be too soon to speak on the topic at all, because if the board hasn't acted on it, sometimes these boards just want to know that something is in the pipeline, something is coming, that the board will be addressing certain matters and possibly coming forward with proposals or such as a supplemental funding request and things of that sort.
Okay, thank you. It's a good conversation. Anyone else wanted to weigh in? Okay. Oh, Laura.
Perhaps it might be helpful, as has been pointed out, that sometimes our agendas don't always line up, that if the town council were potentially to have questions, that maybe those conversations between the town manager and the superintendent could have even taken place prior to a meeting, so that the liaison comes in prepared with potential answers to what might be asked. But that's not always possible, given everybody's very busy day-to-day goings-on. It is awkward. I sat in once recently for Jason, and I felt a little on the hot seat, and I wasn't really sure where that fine line is between, you don't want to speak on behalf of the board, but you're actually being asked at times, can you please answer, right? So it's definitely, I think, an important topic of conversation that perhaps needs greater discussion.
Yeah, agreed. Maybe this is something we should check in on from time to time, and certainly prior to the meetings, we can hopefully reach out to, I guess, Tom Harrison or Brendan and get a sense of where the meeting might go so that nobody feels unprepared. Does that sound reasonable?
No, I didn't say anything about unprepared.
I didn't know. You're always prepared. I have faith in you. I know.
Well, I get their packet, so I know what's on their agenda before I walk into the meeting. So if there's overlap with Board of Education matters, I have some sense of what to prepare for. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that they won't somehow wander around and dive into a subject that isn't really squarely presented on the agenda either. But there's an opportunity to prepare, there's an opportunity to know ahead of time what they are going to talk about.
Thank you.
I would just comment very briefly that there is no hard and fast answer. And if you sit there and they ask you a question and you go, that's our policy. Well, that's our policy. That's not going to work. And the mere factor there means that you will have to answer some degree of questions. And we are going to just have to choose the people who can handle those questions as best they can. And when it gets too far, they'll say, that's too far. We will get back with you on an answer to that. And if we didn't trust our members to do that, we shouldn't appoint them as liaisons. And we have, so I suggest that we repose that level of trust in them. And obviously, people have expressed, depending upon the level of technical questions, concerns for speaking out. And that may be ultimately the answer. On budgetary issues, it's probably going to be a lot easier to do than it will be for the town council, which will be asking more finance issues. But I don't think we can be dogmatic in an answer, and the fact we've had the discussion is adequate enough.
Okay. Thank you. Everyone feel they've commented? Okay. So I will move forward to the board rep to the Capital Region Education Council. How's that going, Jackie?
It's going great. Their next meeting is Wednesday, so I can keep you posted.
Okay, good.
I don't know when, because whenever.
I was willing to put a plug out for you if somebody wanted to.
Every meeting we should do that.
Right?
I love, if anybody would like to take over my position, because I cannot get there during the week like I used to be able to. It's a great adventure. It's every Wednesday. It's only once a month on a Wednesday. They give you lunch. It's very nice.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is the chair's report, and I asked to put the agenda for the graduation on there because we do have new board members who haven't participated with us, so I just thought it might be helpful to walk you through what we typically do, and then you can ask questions so you feel a little bit more at ease. We are excitedly having 3 board members' children graduate tomorrow night, which is very exciting. So what typically happens for that, I know Jackie and Jay are prepared, but Bogdan, you have the opportunity to hand your son his diploma. And what that would look like is when they process up, you just kind of make your way up a couple people ahead until it's his. You'll get to witness it. Jackie will have done it first. Are you going to give?
Okay, it depends. I think so. Andrew's not big on it. Oh, I hate that thing so much. But I'm going to. And that's for the record now, I guess. It's official. But, it's going to be hot tomorrow. So do we have like a cutoff point where we say this is a good idea to have it outside if it's 90 degrees or 92 degrees? Is there such a thing?
If it rains.
If it rains, okay. It's not going to rain.
I think that we're monitoring the weather. And thank you. We're monitoring the weather, and it's expected that it's going to cool down.
Oh, good.
Overnight tonight. That's our hope. That it's not supposed to be as it was today. And after being at graduation practice today and seeing how stuffed we will be in the gymnasium if it had to be in there, even if it's a little bit warm outside, probably won't be as warm as we would all be in that gymnasium, especially with the size of this class.
Very nice.
We are fortunate enough to already have received our gowns and our parking permits. So typically what happens is we arrive and meet in the orchestra room. Since it begins at 5:30, do you think 5 o'clock is fair, Bridget, or do you want earlier than that?
One of the things that I was told, thank you, keep forgetting about that I was told earlier on when I met with the graduation committee here was that although there's reserved parking, we're parking probably 1,200 people total that day between the locations. And the earlier you get here to act on your reserved parking, the better. So I would probably try to be here maybe by 4:45, even if. Only because I was advised by the folks that usually help out with the parking from the fire and the police department that they have in the past had to turn away some folks that would be considered dignitaries that came in a little bit on the later side, in part because we're trying to offer parking to as many folks who need assistance getting up to the building as possible, and that's hard to know in advance also. So we have to do our best with anybody who has a handicap parking pass, but also people that come and don't necessarily have them, but have mobility issues. And if the spots are taken, at least they can help them get out of the car and get in. But if the spot is open, they're going to give them the spot first.
Are the students parking here?
Yes. And they'll be here earlier, so.
Okay. So we do line up together, and we will process out from the building down through the parking lot, all along the lawn, up until the stage area. So we do have the pomp and circumstance, which is pretty fun to kind of walk into and participate in. Did anybody have any other questions about graduation, just to put your minds at ease? It's one of the most exciting things that I think it's a perk to be on the board and be able to participate in this. So, Jeff, did you have any questions? Everybody else is okay? All right, thank you. Look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow all dressed up. Now we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. So you see on our hiring report, page 65, I had the pleasure of completing the interview process for a person you see as new hire there, that it's not actually fully on the agenda yet, because this was she at the time was long-term sub-kindergarten teacher, but just this past week, so it didn't make it in time here because we just started the process. We also hired Jennifer Grady into a permanent position, so I'll just tell you that in advance, to work with us over at Thompson Brook School. So second teacher that I've been able to be a part of the hiring since I came. And we have been recruiting some great people, so that's exciting. You see we have some resignations and 2 more retirements that we are saying goodbye to Mrs. Lavoy and I think it's Fayola from food service. On our enrollment report, you see we are down about 8 students from the previous month. Would want to point out, I think we all know that from a budgetary standpoint, we have to watch kindergarten registrations, and we knew that we were on the cusp there all along. And right now, I always like to look at where we were in August, because that's after some of the rush of sometimes summer registrations and people who close on their homes and so on that are moving in. And if you look at page 67 at Pine Grove in August 2017, we had 114 kindergartners registered, and currently we have 95. So we're closing in, and it's June. At Roaring Brook, we had 72 in August, and we already have 94 registered. So we are keeping an eye on that for class sizes and so on, and we were already prepared for that with the way we were moving staff and the possibilities of the new positions. So not concerned that if it stays this way, we'll be fine. We were expecting this kind of growth, but we definitely have to keep an eye on it as we go into the summer, how many students are registering. Yes?
I just have a question. In looking at the numbers projected for next year, then at Roaring for first grade, we only have 75 students. Is that correct? So class size are only averaging 15?
That is correct right now. I believe that section was still smaller, and correct me if I'm wrong, Donna, but we were moving a little bit of staffing there in regards also at Roaring Brook as a whole.
So it could help with the kindergarten.
Yes.
So we've increased kindergarten to 5
right.
for the staffing and decreased another grade level.
Right. The PTO gifts and donations. I'm just going to hand this down and obviously read it for. Sorry, excuse me. I have a huge file here somewhere for the public. Right now, I just would like to share the list with you. We don't have an action item for it because the finance department is going through the list, because many of these items should have been approved at some other points during the year as they came in. And so we're cross-referencing the list and making sure that what's here has been through the board approval process, and whatever we find has not, that has come in more recently, we will approve in an upcoming meeting. But we have the list put together so that you can get a sense too of just how much has been donated, not just through PTOs, but through others in the community. And also that you would have to take a look at in case you said, wait a minute, I remember that so-and-so donated such and such to a program. If you don't see it here, please do let us know, because obviously I, for one, am picking this up at this time of the year. And I have admittedly not read the minutes of every single previous finance committee or board meeting prior to my arrival, so I can't tell you with absolute certainty which on the list have been approved and which has not, but Ms. Michaud sure can, and they're working on that. We just put this list back out to each school and asked them to add to and check it so that we had accuracy, given the fact that we need to have an approval process as our policy dictates and officially recognize that we own this equipment.
I have a question about that. So when you're just looking at these AHS athletics, are these actual gifts from personal people, or are these things from the booster club, or are they intermingled together?
It depends. It could be from any of the above, yes. From booster clubs, from PTOs, from individuals.
So will we get that kind of a breakdown next time we see this to understand?
Any of the gifts that we need to approve still, yes. This is just the overarching list.
Because what this does remind me of, what this does remind me of is the idea, and I had spoken to this before, that it's so hard to know when you're building a budget when there's so many people doing kind of individual fundraising or donating things, what we really need to provide and what our role is there. So I hope that we can, over the next year, I'm sure we're going to look into that, and maybe this is one of the first steps that we can kind of start figuring that out. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Under the artificial turf update is most, if not all, of the board members already know and were present for the meeting that we had, joint meeting with the town. It was discussed that we would have another discussion here at the board meeting after that meeting to ensure that the board was going to move forward with its request to the town to get a committee together to look at this project, build another building committee, and to support the project, basically. As you know, a letter was sent from our previous superintendent to the town to say the same. They have asked for a letter to be sent again so that we could put it in writing as a board that we do intend to pursue this artificial turf project as it was presented to us. There are still questions, of course, that were discussed that night in regards to fill, for example, and some of you could speak to that probably even better than I could, but regardless, without beating a dead horse, we've been asked again to have a discussion here tonight, and I will act on your recommendation to send the letter. I'm assuming that is what we are going to do given the conversation that we had at the last meeting, board meeting, and also the meeting that we had with the town, but I have not yet drafted the letter because I wanted to ensure that I included anything that came out of tonight's meeting along with what we said in our previous letter.
What is the administration's recommendation?
That we proceed forward with the artificial turf project as it was presented to us.
And have you received an adequate report regarding the survey of the current state of fields, and do you have a comment on that?
So that is part of our conversation tonight, I think, too, for appropriating funds to repair some of the fields. We have received the initial report back from the company that we hired. And chime in here at any time you like, Heather. The field hockey field, as you know, is rusting and being reseeded, aerated, and so on, and cannot be used at this time. Moving forward with this turf project does not solve that immediate issue. We're not going to be able to play on an artificial turf field for quite some time. I believe the recommendation was that if we put it out to bid, if we were right on target with the schedule, it could possibly be done at the beginning of next school year if all the stars align properly. Our baseball field here needs work, significant amount of work, which pause to discuss until we get a little further on the agenda because that's related to year-end encumbrances. And for the most part, the rest of the fields, the report shows the soil tests were good. We had some pH issues somewhere that we are looking to adjust, and we were given a list of maintenance items that frankly mostly could be done by our own folks and are to varying degrees of success, I would say, given our staffing level for maintenance. And so one of the things that we are looking into still is some partnering with the town for assistance. So for example, so that we can pay a little bit more attention to our grounds at the schools over the summer, we are tying in, as we discussed previously in a meeting, to the lawn services the town utilizes for the area right behind our office, our central office, so they can do ours too instead of us moving equipment back and forth, so that we can focus on the grounds and the fields here. So Miles Altimus is putting together for Heather and I will bring it back to you when I have it. I don't have it tonight because we just got these results back on Friday. So I don't have it with me. We've looked at them, and Miles is putting together an appropriate schedule for the maintenance of the rest of the fields. And I say the rest of the fields because the baseball field needs some special attention at this point, which we have talked about in the Finance Committee meeting, and we'll talk a little bit more about tonight. But that said, I think that having the artificial turf, while it changes graduation, because you can't put that kind of equipment on the artificial turf, in all other ways that were discussed at the last meeting by both the athletic director and our operations manager, director, is an essential piece to moving the high school program forward and the ability of the teams to be able to use the fields most appropriately, and also so that our kids here can play on fields that are comparable to what they're playing on very often when they leave the district, because I believe we are one of only 5 in the league that do not have a turf, and if I remember correctly, 2 of those are private schools, not public schools. So I think it gives us more equity for our student athletes to have the same kind of field to play on, and I think we're going to be able to manage it, even the scaled down version, which is what it looks like we are moving forward as a result of that meeting, where we are not right away doing the 2 fields, but I think that is also even still something that wasn't completely decided at that meeting, but it was spoken about that at least at this point, let's move forward and meet and discuss the main turf field.
So barring any objections, I think we were at a place where we wanted to basically present the same letter again, showing our support, wanting to be included on the building committee, as well as once it gets to the final decisions, still participate in the field discussion, but otherwise that we were in support of that. I don't know, Jay, if you wanted to add to that.
I was going to make a motion stating what you just said.
Okay.
So as requested by the town council, I'll make a motion that the board authorize the superintendent to issue a letter similar to the one in the past, where we support the artificial turf at the high school with the conditions that at least one member of the Board of Education is on the building committee, and the full board has the opportunity to review the material that will be used.
Okay, so Jay moves. Do I have a second? No second?
Can I make a friendly amendment?
It depends what it
First,
is.
we have to have a second, though, right?
All right, I'll second it with a friendly amendment. That
Okay, so Laura seconds.
All right,
Okay, discussion?
well, let's hear the friendly amendment.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that, I don't know what the correct language would be, but that it is the Board of Education, not the building committee's decision on the bill. Because there was question about it. We were questioned about it at the last meeting.
I agree. That's why I worded what I said. The full board has the opportunity to review the material.
Okay.
I think that's what I said.
It is, but I want to make sure that whatever we're putting through, that is correct. Is that correct from a process standpoint?
From a process standpoint, you can do that in terms of being an amendment. I understand the town council may have problems with that, but that's Their problem, not ours.
I mean, that was the original language, because
Right,
I made the
agreed.
motion that we have the right to pick the fill, basically.
Okay.
That was,
Because we already voted on this once, and it was questioned at the last meeting. That's why I want to make sure that we have the language exactly right. I'm not questioning you, Jay. I want to make sure that we have our process and our language correct.
I'm going to let Jeff comment.
I just want a clarification. Is the letter saying we want the right to review or have the sole authority to decide the fill?
I think they said approve. So
I
if you
was
don't
in-
get our approval, it don't happen.
I was under the impression from that meeting that they felt that we can review, but it's their decision.
Oh, I understand.
So I want to be clear on what this board is asking and understand that if we ask for approval, they may still say, no, we only get review.
well, then we should not allow that. I mean, we have to say, no, that's not okay. That wasn't our original, that was not our original commitment to this project.
I understand. There's a question, though, from my mind in terms of the structure, right? Do we, as a sub-unit of the city, have the authority to tell town council, no, you will do it our way?
We are not a subunit. We
Okay.
are independent, and we have equal dignity. And within our area of expertise, we reign supreme.
But the funding is theirs.
Right, and they can choose not to fund it if they don't wish to fund it on our
If they choose to
terms.
fund it with a fill that we disagree with, then what happens?
Well, I think what we're saying is get off our land.
They'll tell you it's town property.
And I will tell them that it's been given to us to use.
I cannot support this motion as proposed at this moment.
I don't think I need a friendly amendment. I think that's the way I worded it, and I'm just looking at the safety of the students and why I'm wording it that way. So we had the opportunity to approve the material that they put forward.
I would have a couple of comments. I understand there's an issue regarding what other people play on and whether or not we are going to have parity regarding that. So in the, I can tell you the first time I played on a real grass court, having played on clay, it was a tremendous surprise. And I can tell you playing on concrete is still a tremendous surprise to me. So I understand it makes a difference. And so I can understand that argument. I am concerned that if we think this is such a good idea, that we are only doing one field and not the two, because I think it's only going to get more expensive as it goes on later. I'm also not terribly happy that we can't put stands on it and hold graduation on it, so I guess maybe we'll do it in the baseball field or in the auditorium. So I'm just saying I'm not happy for whatever that's worth.
Can you support the model that they gave to us at the town council meeting?
I came into the meeting today thinking yes, but as I sit here, I'm thinking no. So I'm really close on the edge, but I think if you would ask me right at this moment, I think I'd vote against it.
But if we wait a few seconds, maybe.
You never know. Someone might say something that's dreadfully persuasive.
Oh, boy.
Through the chair, Houston, meaning because the possibility exists, it seems to be that the project is moving forward with one, not two fields. That's why you would vote no? That was discussed. And again, board members chime in or correct me. And the idea of how much more expensive it would be if it was done at a later time was discussed too. Heather, do you remember that dollar amount so that we can just put it out here?
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't present at that meeting.
No, but they gave it to us in the other. There is a cost.
But there is a cost.
There is a cost to not doing them both at the same time because we already have the equipment here. We already have the staging and so on, so you're not kind of proverbially reinventing the wheel to come out and do the field a second time. And if I don't want to speak to the dollar amount because I don't remember it right off the top of my head, but it was more expensive.
It also depends, not just the dual mobilization issue, but as time goes on, the cost will go up anyway. And I'm just concerned. I'm not happy about it, because if this is such a good idea, we ought to do both fields.
Houston, I completely agree with what you're saying, but I feel it's been delayed so long that if we do not vote as a board tonight in support, we will put us in a position where we won't even have one field. So I think 2 is better than 1, but 1 is better than none. And we're going to end up with none if we don't vote and support it.
Okay.
So, may I speak? I also wish that we could do the whole project, but the reality is the state has said there's no money available for this project, and I believe that you were unable to attend the last meeting that we had. There was considerable discussion around this issue of whether or not to put it out for referendum as a whole project. And the reality, I think, is financially that there's no money there to do it.
I'm aware of that. I attended the town council meetings regarding that, and I'm also concerned that there are costs with bonding, and the incremental in cost with bonding twice is probably going to be dramatically higher than bonding once. But I think Jeffrey had a question I would yield.
Thank you. I agree with Jay that this project's long overdue, and I want a field. My concern is if we send a letter saying we have veto authority over the field, they'll say, fine, veto it, and we end up with no field. That's my objection to the letter being worded, giving us that authority.
It's a sticky situation, right? Because the truth is, the reality is, if something goes awry, they're not going to go to the town council. They're going to come to the Board of Ed, and they're going to expect that we have done our due diligence and that we did the best by the students in this town. And how can we do the best by the students in this town if we do not put the effort in and really demand the very, very best? And maybe we use language that's less veto power and more, how can we work together with some wording that kind of prescribes that we are working together and that we are both agreeing. I'm sure the town council doesn't want to do that either, right? None of us want to, we all want to go to bed at night thinking that we have made the very safest decisions for kids. So what if we prescribe some kind of language that really, describe some kind of language that really prescribes a relationship around the fill that we can both work with. That way nobody can say, I'm also a little concerned that they might use this to delay further, and I really don't want that. So maybe we can work with that somehow to kind of create language that requires us to work together.
Okay, David?
Towards Jackie's point, if we could do something in the language that would say that we're anxious to support the field, subject to a mutually agreeable choice of fill, and put the issue out there just to say that at the end of this process, we all have to agree as to what the fill is. Would we ever really exit this project no matter what fill they choose? I don't know. I think the sentiment of the community, from what I've heard, is they simply want a field, and they're not really picky about what the fill is. I'd like to think that we get the best possible fill, but I don't think we can give ourselves the sole authority over this. If we send a letter to that effect, they're going to call our bluff, number one, and they're the ones with the money. So we want the money, we want the field, and we want some choice as to what the fill is. That's not too much to ask, but I think we've circled almost all the way back to the original language of what Jay was talking about in the first place.
Okay, maybe one more comment, Laura.
I want to take somebody else's spot who hasn't had a chance to speak. Can we also check to make sure? I thought it was 2 members of the board that would be on the building committee, not just 1. A minimum of 2. Can you check on that and see? Because they do make a lot of decisions.
Are you going to move to amend the motion, or are you going to do something else?
I thought it was 1, but I'll make the motion to reflect the same as the previous letter.
Thank you. That's what was important to me, at least in this case. And I still believe that we should retain the right ultimately to determine the fill, but I agree that the language could be something more along the lines of a mutually agreeable solution. It concerns me, though, that what was presented to us could potentially include materials that might come with product specifications that include materials that might be toxic or cancer-causing. And that is something of great concern to others in the community, I believe, as well.
Okay, so procedurally, the amendment, we didn't have a second on that, so are we just sticking with the original?
They both agreed to amend. The first, the mover and the seconder have both agreed, so both amendments are in there in the motion.
Okay,
So can I second Jay's motion with the,
She's already seconded.
oh, you seconded,
Right.
and she added the,
Right. And I agreed, so it's
Point of order, can we have a restatement of the
Yeah, I was
motion
just
as
gonna say,
amended?
I need to know what.
As amended.
Yes.
But I'll take it back if you don't agree, Jay.
No, so I will word the motion again that we are responding to the town council's request and authorizing the superintendent to issue a letter similar to the previous one. So if the previous one stated at least stated one Board of Ed member, it would be one, and it stated two Board of Ed members, it would be two. I thought it was one, but you can look back at that letter. And the other condition to us supporting the field at the high school on artificial turf was the board having the right to approve the material used for fill.
So are we agreeing to the language of mutually agreeing with town on the film?
The last time we wrote the letter, the town didn't have a problem with the wording, so I'm not really sure why we need to change it.
Okay.
I think they're just asking for the same letter with a newer date because it's a new Board of Ed that we currently have, so.
That's what I thought we were comfortable with. So, did you have a question?
I just want clarity. So we're asking for right to approve the fill. Okay.
I'm sorry, because I know we're going round robin. I just want one more question. Because I think it has to be clear. The right to approve the fill as a full board, or as the one or two members that are on this public building committee? And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to throw a wrench into it, but I think that's part of the, my understanding is that's part of the purpose of the building committee. So, and that would be the purpose of the two liaisons that were there. So from a process standpoint, I want to be clear, and from this letter standpoint, are we expecting that to get done by the board members in that committee? Or is it somehow coming back here to the full board once that committee makes a decision? And I'm asking that without full knowledge as I sit here about how it normally works by our charter. I would have to defer to someone else advising what that, in other words, I don't want to make promises that
I would be comfortable taking a recommendation from the one or two board members that were on the building committee.
But then would we vote on those recommendations?
Probably, we probably have to, right?
I think we should.
But I mean, we'd be basically like moving it up from a subcommittee, no?
That board member could be outvoted on the committee.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's why it should come up to the full board, in my opinion.
So you have to be clear what the motion is. The way you said the motion is the Board of Education approves. The superintendent raised concerns. I think it's inappropriate to amend the motion again, because if you want to change it, I suppose you could, but you're saying the Board of Education approves, which means the Board of Education, qua Board of Education, will be meeting and approving. Hopefully in consultation with the town council or the building committee or a bunch of other people, I don't care. But if we don't approve, it doesn't happen, is what you're saying.
Correct. That was the wording, the full board.
Okay.
Yes.
Just want to be clear.
Okay, we ready to, I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All opposed.
Not opposed.
Okay, so
Houston.
opposed by Houston and Jeff. Any abstentions? So passes 6, opposed 2, abstentions none.
Wait a minute.
Wait a
That's
minute,
only
yeah, let's do 7.
Did you vote?
7, correct, I'm sorry. My brain was
7 in favor.
7, 2.
7 to 2.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we move to the consent calendar. This is an opportunity if any board member wants to remove an item from the consent calendar, do so. Jay?
Yes, I'd like to remove item C, the approval of the Roaring School student lockers, because more information has come forward since this was put on the agenda.
Okay, so that will be taken off the consent calendar. Is there anything else on the consent calendar, or can I have a motion to approve the remaining items?
Move to approve the remaining items.
Okay, Houston moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jackie. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the remaining items on the consent calendar move, and item C will be postponed to a later time. Okay, so now under new business, we do have a lot of first read policies here, so what I would like to do with you, just for clarity, is to go item by item and just see if anybody has comments or questions and just move along so we don't miss one. Okay? So on item A, policy 3000, goals for finance and operation, any questions or comments? Okay. Item B.
Hold on. Yes.
Did you say hold on?
So I'm sorry, I was responding
Oh,
to
okay,
Jackie.
I'm sorry. Policy 3011, internal controls, any questions or comments on that? Item C, policy 3120, preparation of budget document. Item D, policy 3152, spending public funds for advocacy. Item E, policy 3160, transfer of funds between categories and amendments. Okay. Item F, policy 3171.1, non-lapsing education fund.
Question, do we want that in place for the start of the fiscal year? I would ask that administration advise us.
This particular policy, we would like to have in place. We would like to ask on a regular basis. So I would say our recommendation is absolutely.
I would move the approval of the policy and to waive the second read.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Jay seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it moves unanimously. So that will move forward without a second read, the non-lapsing education fund. Item G, policy 3230, federal, state funds, grants, and other revenue. Questions or comments? Okay. Item H, policy 3231, medical reimbursement for special education students. Item I, policy 3240, non-resident tuition. J, policy 3250, materials and service fees and charges.
Can I comment here?
Of course.
Board members, this is where we already had the discussion about adding in language about the concern related to students who had financial hardships. So this actually was already moved to the board at the last meeting. So to be clear, this is really not the first read. This is the second read. You just see that there is the language added in to the policy that families experiencing financial hardship may request a waiver of fees from the athletic director or their school's principal. And these instances, of course, will remain confidential. No student will be denied participation in sport or activity due to financial constraints. So we added that into the policy, but you have seen the entirety of the policy once already.
And would administration support approval of this immediately?
Yes.
I would move the approval and waive the policy requiring a second read. Not even sure that's necessary because I think that it really is the second read anyway.
Moved by Houston. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Jay seconds. Any questions or comments? All in? Jackie, did you have?
I'm all in, but so will this be implemented before the next school year?
Yes.
Will this kind
By
of
doing it tonight, yes.
Yes.
But I mean, are we actually going to be actively going to all the different websites that the school runs? You know, like I'm thinking of the athletic department.
We'll have this, yes.
Will be changed.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Will this also apply to field trips?
Yes.
And theater and things like that?
Yes.
So it's a general kind of...
Activities.
Anything excellent, thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, item K, policy 3260, disposition of obsolete property. Okay, item 11, policy 3280, gifts and donations. Any questions? Item M, policy 3281, fundraising activities. Item N, policy 3300, purchasing. Laura, did you have something?
Yes, on page 112, could you please change the word, which I think somebody probably couldn't read my handwriting, under bid specifications will be, it should be reviewed by the superintendent, not revealed.
Yes, okay, that's important.
Okay? And then Houston, I would ask you to please clarify, because I'm sorry, my notes were poor, and I could not give good direction to Shirley. On page 113, there had been some discussion around adding language around reverse auctions. And again, I'm sure she could not read my handwriting, where you see in red where it says, when a reverse auction process is utilized as the manner in which to gather competitive bids. It's a little awkward. Can you please clarify the intent of the language as you proposed?
The intent of the language and the part after the comma, the interesting part, then A to B determined online. I guess maybe yeah, we probably have to fix that up a little bit. The intention is to allow reverse auctions electronically, which means we put out a bid specification and say, from Monday to Friday, we'll take bids. What happens is someone comes out and they make a bid, then someone else comes in, they make a lower bid. So it's an ongoing process. There is no, as I call it, quaint 20th century procedure of having a single envelope with a person's bid in it that stays immutable. The computer platform, in fact, allows people to competitively bid against a known lower price. So the objective was to conform with state law, to allow us to use that procedure, and to make sure that we can use it when we need to. We're not stuck in this quaint 20th century thing because you haven't got an envelope with a secret bid stamp on it on the outside saying that there's a bid inside, because that wasn't done, that won't prevent us from conducting these kinds of auctions.
So what would be a better way of phrasing this?
I will be in consultation with the superintendent and come up with some language. But it's not bad.
Okay.
Okay, so
I think we could go back to, I think we do have the correct language on a previous version of this, so.
Right.
Okay.
We can fix that.
Thank you.
any other questions or comments on this one? Okay. Letter O, policy 5123, retention in elementary and middle school.
I would ask the administration if this is something that's important to get into the books for the new upcoming school year starting in August.
Yes, thank you. And at the committee meeting, we actually had made a decision as a subcommittee to bring it to the board for approval tonight, not for a first read, because this is another example of, as Houston mentioned, it would be best for us to have this in place when we return to school.
I would move that it be approved and that the requirement of a second read be waived.
Second.
All right, so Houston moves, David seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously.
And just as a reminder, also, we did also review the attendance policy, which has been left off of this agenda because it does require further review of the regulations, but it may require a special meeting in case we, like these, may have to move it because we don't meet over the summer.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Okay, that gets us through the policies. Now on to approval of the 2018-2019 General Board of Ed meeting dates. I'm happy it does stick with our Tuesday plan moving forward. Beth, did you have a comment?
I do. I would request that the board change the September 18th date at sundown. That's the start of Yom Kippur, the holiest day on the Jewish calendar.
Oh, I completely agree.
I had the same concern.
Okay, so the 25th, I believe, is an open date because it's the fourth one of the month. Are you comfortable, Bridget, if we adjust it, or would you rather go back and look at that?
Actually, for some reason, I had us as meeting on that date and time. So I'm wondering if that date and time was picked at the beginning of the year when we approved everything. So I think it was.
Actually, I will say I had it all in my calendar, and I did have to change from the 25th back to the 18th, so perhaps
I thought we already discussed this.
Yeah, I thought we'd already discussed that.
Okay, so can I have, Jeff, do you want to make a motion?
Well, I would just say it was in, well, why don't we just see if there are any other questions? And it sounds we would just, we've already approved the dates through December, I believe. So
Correct.
we only should be approving the dates from January on.
Correct.
Okay, so then is that okay?
Yes, because this is what I was given, and you did the other approvals prior to me coming. So we were just looking to get them on the books for the remainder of the school year.
Okay.
So from January on.
Any other comments?
And I will change it back to the 25th.
I will just let everybody know, and I don't think it's a tremendous surprise, I have a standing commitment in May that will require me to miss that meeting is May 21, just to let you know.
Okay. So motion by Jeff to approve the remainder of the, is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, do I have a second? Second. Okay, Laura seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the meeting dates move forward unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Now, letter Q, approval of additional year-end encumbrances. Heather, would you like to speak to that?
During the Finance Subcommittee last week, we had a discussion about adding additional potential year-end encumbrance expenditures onto the prior list that was approved in May. As you can see, the estimated unencumbered balance this month, following some changes over the 4-week period, is about $52,000. So it is important for the Finance Committee to realize that administration requests further expenditures, specifically field maintenance. I know we've touched on that a few times. Also, these are some items that would go deeper, as we kind of discussed in May's meeting. So we were looking to possibly look at the take-home books for grade 3. You approved K-1-2 last month, but grade 3 would have that same need as well due to the homework policy change. The AMS Tech Ed computer lab is, for lack of a better term, desperately in need of computers. They were hand-me-downs from the high school lab. We've been trying to push down those programs into the middle school for a more efficient feeder model. At this point, the lab is desperately obsolete, so we were going to look at possibly replacing that next year, but this is definitely on the priority list. If we could possibly get it in this summer, this would become a priority for the IT department. E-rate, unbelievably, Avon was awarded Category 2 E-rate funds this year. It's only happened twice since I've been here, but we are receiving funding for some equipment through the federal program. So that would be a request for us to fulfill our portion of it. We have a split with the feds, so it's wonderful. We should take advantage of that. And then finally, we're looking at doing some restructuring at the central office for some necessary moves that will have to occur. Because of that, we have inadequate furniture for the sizing of the rooms and things of that nature. So we have had WB Mason out to measure and whatnot, and we're estimating at this point about $20,000 in additional furniture and fixtures, things like that. So this is the list in priority order, according to administration. I did write a motion that also touched upon what we had spoken about at finance, providing administration the ability to make adjustments as necessary to the prior year-end encumbrance list and this year-end encumbrance list, and spend down any unencumbered balance in a responsible manner towards operations of the school district.
May I?
Yes.
Heather, under the furniture, I just want to be clear. we're not buying mahogany desks. That besides the furniture that you mentioned, we have some new employees that aren't here yet, right? That need full offices. But some of this that falls under the guise of furniture is also the cubby partitions for the moves that have to happen to section off office space. So it's a combination of the two for that amount, correct? And any other necessary items, really. It's not, I just want to be clear, it's not just furniture.
I should have put furniture fixtures.
Because otherwise it just seems to be quite a bit of money on furniture alone, I would think people would assume.
Okay, any questions or comments?
I would move that the list of additional year-end encumbrances as specified on page 124 be made subject to availability of funds before the end of the June 30th, 2018 fiscal year. I always like doing my own motions. That's all right.
We do. Thank you. I didn't realize that's what you had put in front of me.
I like my own motion. It's okay.
You can use your own motion.
I did.
Nobody's saying you can't. But I just want to hand this out.
I may not get a second.
I just want to hand this out so that everyone sees. We had the dollar amount too, just to be.
I referenced the page number, which shows a dollar amount of $152,202.76.
Thank you.
Okay, Houston moves, do I have a second?
Second.
David seconds. Any questions or comments? Jay?
I just want to discuss further the first item on the list, the field maintenance, and I'm just still concerned after reviewing the report of the Finance Committee that we don't know the full cost of those fields, so we're leaving as, I think Heather explained, flexibility to the administration if that comes in higher. I know it's a very specific number right now, but I want to make sure we have the flexibility to address any of the issues if they are varied from the numbers presented.
That is the intention of the motion.
Thank you. Anyone else have comments or questions? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Okay, our final item is approval of the tech lease agreement. I don't know, Heather or Bridget, what would you prefer?
And we have Mr. Wojtek. Yes. It's not that you're here to be put on the spot, but thank you for coming. In case there were any questions, but I'll allow Heather to speak to it, and I'll add in as necessary.
Thank you.
Every year, I think since I've been here, we've been coming in front of the Board of Education for permission to the elected bodies at the town level, the opportunity to lease our educational technology. This is no different. Just so everyone's aware, this has to do with fiscal year 18-19 funds, but we're trying to get it in front of council and finance as quickly as humanly possible so that we can get those computers in for the IT department to roll out as soon as possible as soon as the school year commences. So that's essentially what we're talking about here. I'm more than happy to touch upon what Dr. Wojtek has put together. He's looking to purchase 105 laptops to update various faculty laptops at both Avon Middle School and Thompson Brook. And then, this is probably the most exciting, 505 Chromebooks that will create a one-to-one device saturation or student ratio from kindergarten to grade 8. So we're very excited.
That is exciting. I do have one question. I do remember there was an issue about battery replacement for some of the equipment. Is that going to be resolved through this, or is it going to continue to be an issue? Can we allow Mr. Dr. Wojtek to-
Would you like my answer?
Yes, please.
These Hewlett-Packard devices, both the Chromebooks and the laptops, have a battery warranty equal to the extended warranty that we purchased up to 3 years. For the laptops, we have a 4-year warranty, but HP will cover the first 3 years of that. Dell covered 60 to 90 days, even if we had a 4-year warranty. So batteries were excluded. We can pay an additional amount, but I think that the difference in cost to cover all of those computers is going to be excessive. So unless I find out that there's a much lower number, it will be less expensive to replace batteries on a one-to-one basis. Part of the problem is these laptops don't have a replaceable battery. So if it has to be replaced, we have to send it in or bring them out here. The warranty for the Hewlett-Packards is on-site warranty. So if Hewlett-Packard comes out, they replace the warranty on-site, which is going to be a lot more efficient than mailing it out, waiting for it to be repaired and sent back. But with the current high school laptops, have 3-year warranties on their devices. The new ones are the exact same spec. They were able to get it to us at the same price because we were willing to have them drop shipped here. So the money they saved on shipping, they applied to reducing the cost of the laptops. And so we'll have 3-year warranty on these devices and all of the HP Chromebooks, the 505 Chromebooks.
Excellent, thank you. Addresses that. It is very exciting to have a 1-to-1 ratio, so this is great news. Do any other board members have questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion before us. Does anyone wish to read it into the record?
Or make your own.
I'll do it.
Okay.
I motion to approve and move to the Town Council and Board of Finance a request to enter into a lease agreement for educational technology.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Jackie seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Dr. Wojtek.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we get to the communication from Avon Board of Ed members. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share? Okay. Any communication from the public? Okay, thank you. So now what I would like to read into the minutes, but we will take a recess prior to entering into executive session. We will be going in for 4 items this evening, and we do welcome in Ms. Mashad for one of them. So we will be discussing concerning a residency tuition issue, discussion and possible action concerning ratification of a proposed collective bargaining agreement with the safety and security specialist, which is where Heather Mashad will assist us with that. Then negotiation strategies of non-union contracts, and finally, discussion and possible action of superintendent's employment contract. So I move that we go to recess for 10 minutes while Eric gets to break down the camera and take a bit of a break. Do I have a second on that?
I'll do a second, and also, we've always traditionally included the motion to go into executive session, so I extend the motion to that as well.
Okay, so do we say that at 8:33, or we wait until the end of the recess would be my hunch, right?
No, you make it now, and just there's a period of delay, so 8:33, and then we vote on it.
Okay, do I have a second?
I did.
Oh, I apologize. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that settles that. Thank you.